Do your purchase orders and purchase agreements look one and the same? If so, you definitely want to listen to this episode where I show you how I use this doc to make sure all of my shipments ship on time or early and save me about 5 or 6% of the purchase order. Welcome back to the Wizards of Amazon podcast, your weekly blueprint for explosive success. I'm Carlos Alvarez, full-time successful Amazon seller and organizer of the largest Amazon seller meetup group in the world. Let's do this. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Wizards of Amazon podcast, where we cover all things private label. My name is Carlos Alvarez, and I will be your host for the show. What's up, everybody? Guys, it's been a little bit since I've recorded a solo episode. Something that, for those of you listening to these shows, may not realize is that sometimes it makes sense to batch record episodes, and therefore not every day there's this stress of actually recording. But I'm recording this episode December 10th, and I do believe it's going to come out in about 2 weeks. So it's really nice to jump back on. I haven't recorded a solo episode in a month and a half, I feels like, since before the podcast launch. I hope the fourth quarter is treating everybody amazing. On this side, we had record-breaking sales for our Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and the rest of the fourth quarter is looking the same. As you can see, as I've already mentioned from the little teaser at the beginning of this, the topic of today's episode is going to be, how I use, first of all, the difference between a purchase order and a purchase agreement in my world, and how I use these docs this tool to save me money and make sure my products do not ship late. Now, if you're selling private label and you're involved in any kind of community, whether in Facebook or on Meetup, you know that one of the biggest complaints that sellers get is their product shipping late. And usually it has to do with the concern that, first of all, their money's tied up. And second, that they are concerned that they might go out of stock. And we all know how damaging that'll be. I'm not going to touch too much today on this episode with out of stock issues or negotiating terms with your suppliers. This is definitely something that will be in future episodes and how I go about doing this. So here in this episode, I want to go over what I call the anatomy of a purchase agreement and the 5 major parts in the anatomy of a purchase agreement. And then before getting into that, I want to talk about what most people look at when they receive a purchase order / purchase agreement, and to me, what the differences are between the two. So a purchase order that all of us are probably accustomed to is, you're working with your factory, you've gone through the samples, and you've reached a point where you're ready to order from them and send them money. And what you usually receive, and this is, again, at the end of this episode, if you feel like, oh my God, I'm doing this wrong, I'm a horrible business person, don't. Most people, they're doing it this way as well. And when I first started, so did I. Now, you're probably receiving some Excel spreadsheet file, and it has the bank information of the supplier where you're going to send the money, the terms as whether it's going to be, 30/70, 40/60. It's probably something like that in the beginning. The Incoterms, or whether it's FOB, XWorks, or whatever you worked out, the amount of products you ordered, and maybe the packaging and mold fees all rolled up into that. A lot more in another episode on how to handle mold fees and truly take possession of your mold. But again, like I said, in this episode, I want to cover the anatomy of a purchase agreement. So the major difference to me between a purchase order and a purchase agreement is going to be the details involved. So that purchase order is going over really the transactional side of the order, and that is important. But I feel that that in and of itself, and also if you go to court, that in and of itself is incomplete. There's a lot of other moving parts involved with an order like this. And in this episode, we're going to talk about as if we're ordering from China, but this applies anywhere, anytime you're working with a factory. The other half of that, like what's missing, in my opinion, is the actual agreement, the purchase agreement, all those other details that you've already agreed to verbally on Skype, WeChat, in person, whatever the case may be, that's where those things get documented. And that's the thing that we all reference. That's how people are held accountable. So I'm going to go through, I like to keep these episodes relatively short. I can't speak today, but I want to keep these episodes relatively short so that you can, get the most out of this quickly, and I can be respectful of your time. So the first important part of a purchase agreement, in my opinion, and this one, even people I know that have tried to craft things that, were beyond just a regular purchase order Excel sheet, seem to miss, and that is terminology. Sounds boring, super important. So terminology is all of those items or all of those words that you guys are using back and forth that, are kind of ambiguous or can be interpreted more than one way. A really popular one right there, and I'll keep referring to terminology through the episode, is one of the popular ones is 60-day lead time or lead time. So lead time is usually followed by an amount of days. For those of you that don't know what lead time is, it's the amount of time a factory needs to, get your products ready. So in this case, we're just talking about a factory with a 60-day lead time. Again, applies to any amount of days. And they tell you it's a 60-day lead time. 60 days comes and goes, and the products are not ready. Now this is extremely damaging because you may want to, if you listen to a previous episode, you may have wanted to coordinate an inspection. You need to coordinate a container to send your goods over. And if the products are not going to be ready on the date that they need to be ready, this could cost you more money and really, cause some confusion in your supply chain. So why was it late? A bunch of reasons, and some of the things we're going to cover in this episode are going to help you not deal with those anymore. But one of the things that's going to happen is that when you approach the factory and you start telling them like, hey, you said 60 days, it's 65, it's 70, what's going on? And they give you every excuse under the sun. One way that I get around this is, what days are we talking about? Like, we need to clarify that. Are we talking about 60 calendar days, 60 working days, 60 Chinese days, 60 US days? Do holidays count? If so, which calendar are we talking about? Because we have different holidays. So in terminology, one of the things that we define so that we can hold accountable is what days are we talking about? What calendar are we going off of? And normally when I'm speaking to the factory about that, and they're given an option, they usually just say US days, which is the most favorable for me, and it's calendar US days. But again, I'm okay with whatever days they pick, even if it was working days, Chinese calendar, and they happen to have more holidays than I do. I'm okay with that because I'm going to plan accordingly. I'm going to place orders in anticipation of that timeline. I'm going to coordinate my shipping along that timeline. So this part is not to really force them into choosing a certain amount of days or a calendar that I want them to go off of. It's for planning purposes on my end and accountability. So terminology, things like that go into the terminology section of your purchase agreement. The next one is quality control, is what I like to call this. And this is another one that a lot of people miss. So if you're working with a trading company or a sourcing agent, or if you're talking to a private label seller about their PL product, everyone gets super secretive. Nobody wants to give up their source. Nobody wants to really tell what they're selling or what they're buying. Well, when you're working, and usually that's because, as a seller, we don't want somebody else to know. They could sabotage our listing. Somebody might feel that the niche is going to get saturated now. And if you're a trading company or a sourcing agent, you don't want to give up. Most people don't want to give up their source, a factory that has the products you want, because they feel they're going to get cut out of the equation. And a lot of times they are. And a lot more on that in another episode. But in this case, quality control, we're not going to ask for anything like that. We're going to ask the factory, and this is going to take place after the sample stage. So let's talk about a sample. You order sample or samples from a factory because you want to approve a certain level of quality in the product that you want to order. Now, what happens a lot with factories in every country, in China, we're using this example, is You order a wine aerator sample from them because, this is the exact wine aerator you want for whatever reasons. And the factory has the wherewithal to be able to make that aerator. But you're impatient, you want it now, you need the sample or you're moving on, or they know you're looking at a whole bunch of other people in Alibaba or 1688. So they know another factory or a showroom that has some of these aerators laying around, and they'll send you that one. They want to preserve the chance of working with you. And they feel like telling you that it's going to be, 2-3 weeks before they can crank out a sample, or it's going to be too expensive for you, or you're just going to move on. So they send you one. And most of the times people like it. They're like, yeah, let's go with that. That's good. So then the factory, you go through all the rigmarole, and then the factory winds up mass producing the product. The problem there is that the sample you approved and all the different things you considered in approving that sample was not actually the product or the quality, type, material, all of that product that this factory was mass producing. Now, it could be better, it could be worse, but it's not what you approved, which means you wasted money on the samples, you wasted time, and you've invited a great deal of risk into your process. So with quality control, taking it back to what you're going to ask the factory, and that is, once you've approved the sample, you're going to ask the factory to provide you who they are buying their raw materials from to make this. And if your product's a lot more complicated, then if there's a lot of different components, yes, I am saying that you should get this information. And yes, factories do provide this information to you. This is not, a competitor of theirs that makes an aerator and then they're concerned that you're going to start a relationship with them and they're going to make your aerators. No, this is someone that if they're making, let's just say, coffee mugs, ceramic coffee mugs, these are the people that provide like the stone and the sand and all of this stuff. These people don't have the setup. They're raw material suppliers to make the end product. So there's no conflict there. Nobody gets worried. And it's something that you really, really should ask for. And once you receive that, what you're gonna do is you're gonna include that in the purchase agreement. So now you have a section on terminology, you have a section on quality control, and you're gonna include that in the purchase agreement as a, look, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna buy from this or these companies to supply these raw materials, and we're not gonna deviate. If for any reason, because things happen, that we need to deviate, they need to let you know and that you need to approve it. It's important. This happens a lot as well. You agree on a sample from the factory. Let's say they even provided you the sources, or the approved vendors is what I like to start calling them, the approved vendors for your raw material. And then, an order or two in, they find other raw material suppliers or other suppliers of components at a more affordable price or a cheaper price for them. In most cases, you're getting what you paid for. So it's cheaper, it's probably cheaper product, and it's not going to have the same experience with the customer. It's going to break down faster, it's going to bleed, it's going to leak, it's going to, it's all kind of problems can happen. And again, it's not what you improved. You're inviting risk into the equation, and you don't want to do that. So they were just trying to save some money. They didn't sit down and think, what's a really bad product I can get that's going to torpedo this person's venture and he never orders from us again. Like, that's not what goes on in their head. They're just trying to be more profitable in their business, just like we are. And you have no idea what's going on. Unbeknownst to you, the approved vendor switches, you're a couple orders in, and then bam, your defect rate goes up. It exceeds 1%. And then this domino effect hits you, and you're like, you're wondering what hit you. You did everything right, and now you're looking at a suppressed listing. Your BSR's tanking, and it's an ugly scenario. You get it. I don't have to paint the whole thing. So the quality control is very important that you do get those approved vendors. If you're ordering a couple products here, a couple products there, and you're trying to test some stuff, that's not my model. And no. If that's your model and you're looking at this, this will probably seem like it's more work than it's worth. In my model, and I feel like anyone serious about building a brand and having control over the quality of their products, this is important. So no. So that's number two. Number three is going to be inspections. We covered inspections in another episode, so I won't dive too deep into what inspections are, but in short, they inspect your product. They inspect it before it ships. They can do random inspections. You can inspect the actual factory as a whole. Now, I suggest you definitely go back and listen to the episode I did on inspections. It was actually episode 1 of this show, and the different types of inspections. I believe I go into what are my favorite 3 inspection types for using inspections, and the company I use is VTrust. But why we're touching on inspections again is for 2 reasons, and one of them ties into the quality control issue. So one of them is the cost of inspections. There's costs associated with inspections. So if you're working with a factory and you can't just sneak your inspectors in, this is something that's coordinated. So you're going to let them know that you're sending in a third-party inspection team, whichever it may be. I highly suggest VTrust, and that that you are going to pay for that inspection, and that's to be that's how the industry works. Like you want the inspection, you pay for the inspection, or you go over there and inspect it yourself. But the factory's not going to pay for that inspection. So you let them know up front that you're paying for that inspection. You want to include this in the purchase agreement. But what happens if the inspection fails? Or what happens if it's not considered an outright failure, but some of the things discovered in your packaging or in your product do not meet the agreed upon standard in the sample that you guys have agreed upon, and it breaks some of the terminology maybe, or it doesn't hit that quality control, whatever the case may be, something has been exposed and discovered in the inspection, and it needs to be dealt with before we can proceed. This part's really important. So subsequent inspections, I don't want to have to foot the bill for. I ordered a product that we agreed upon the quality control and what it would look like, and that was not delivered. So I put the onus on them to now pass inspection. So I let them know that we need to agree on that subsequent inspections will be paid for by them until we pass inspection. So inspections at this point are, depending on the product, the more complicated the product as far as chemical or something like that, then the more costly the inspection. But typically you could be looking at $100 to $250 here to go back and look at these other expenses. And all of this counts in your business. All of this influences your landed cost at FBA. So you want to put this on them. What I find when doing this and approaching them with it, and with all these points, the initial reaction from them when you bring it up is, oh, no, we're not doing that. And you have to have dialogue with them and go back and forth and understand where they're coming from, help them understand where you're coming from. A phrase that's worked really good for me in this regard is company policy. So you're kind of saying it's bigger than me here. This is something we do. Also, you want to say stuff for long-term cooperation. So company policy dictates this so that we can have long-term cooperation. That long-term cooperation is a big deal with them. So inspections, you want to say that they are responsible for paying for subsequent inspections until they pass. What happens a lot with me is that they do not come out of pocket for these subsequent inspections. Their negotiation tactic back is, you pay for them and we'll take it out of the remaining balance of your order. Personally, I'm okay with that. I have no issues with doing that. But if you don't set this up this way, then when you go to pay the remaining balance of your order to ship it, you're paying that. So you want to get this out there. This is an easy win. Several times I'll have, 2 or 3 inspections done this way because something didn't pass. Whereas other times, something didn't pass and I was like, that's really minor. That's really minor. I'm going to let that go. Or, yeah, I wish that was different. Next round, I'm going to pay more attention to that. I just don't want to delay things anymore, and I don't want to pay more money. So here, it lets them know, look, an inspection is going to happen. If you do something and it's not what we agreed on, you're going to be paying to fix this. So they're less likely to just gloss over things or turn the other cheek. Look the other way, so to speak. Sorry. They're less likely to do that. So inspections, super important. Get that verbiage in there. That would be the third part of the anatomy of a purchase agreement. Number 4, This one I call returns, refunds, and damaged goods. This blows me away that a lot of other sellers don't do this. And I want to say ahead of time before I get into this one that if you have a long-standing relationship with a factory, or even if you've ordered before and you sent them money, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to negotiate this point than if you were starting from the beginning. Albeit not impossible. You can definitely still work this in, depending on your product and depending what's going on. So returns, refunds, and damaged goods, exactly like they sound. What this looks like is even when you send in an inspection, we'll use one of the brands I sold in the past, which was a cigar accessories brand. And this particular product was a humidor. And this humidor had a lot of loose pieces inside. So there was besides the wooden box, there was a little drawer with a velvet lining inside. And inside the drawer, there was these two, little gold-plated keys that can lock and unlock the humidor. There was, 2 to 3 dividers in the inside. There was a Spanish cedar inlay tray that sat in there. There was a, humidifier block. There was, sticky adhesive with Velcro and all that to mount the humidifier. You get it. Like, it goes on and on. A lot of tiny, an instruction manual, all this stuff. So an inspection company or inspection service, they can't go through every single unit. And while the humidors themselves and everything did pass inspection, and if there was a problem with the gloss or the unit, it would have been caught in the inspection. But all of these other little loose items that did not or could not realistically be caught, I deal with them on my end. And what that looks like is a customer saying, the listing said there was 2 keys, there's only 1. I can't calibrate my analog hygrometer. I'm missing a divider, and you get it, on and on and on. So what happens here is that, let's say that I ordered 1,000 pieces. If all I did was order the 1,000 pieces like we had on our purchase order and we had agreed to, I would now need to cannibalize my other units, pay for shipping to get it to the customer, plus deal with any defect rates or anything that's happening on Amazon. The customer might send back or do a return. I need to recall the unit. There's a lot of associated costs associated with it, as you know. So that can get expensive. And you're now, even if there was no problem with the units, you're now taking a loss, because when you cannibalize these units, you can't sell them. So returns, refunds, and damaged goods come in. This is a pretty straightforward one to negotiate with suppliers. And for me, it's usually working like this. And again, it's harder once you're already working with someone, because you've pretty much let them know what you're willing to accept. And I let them know, like, look, let's say the units that you send me that do not have a piece inside of them, how are we handling that? And they'll let me know something like, no, we check everything, like everything's inside, no worries. So I let them know, look, all right, I ordered 1,000 pieces. What I want is, since there's so many moving pieces in here, I don't want to cannibalize my units. In addition, at no additional cost to me, I want you to send me, say 15% or 10% extra keys, dividers, and all these different accessory parts, so I don't have to cannibalize the unit in this. Initially, they balk. They're like, no. We can send that to you, but it's at a discounted rate, but you have to pay for it. And I say, look, no problem. What I'll do is, every time there's an issue like this, you just pay for return shipping to go to you. And then they just totally freak out. They're like, no, you can't ship this to me. Customs and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, then just include the other accessories. They cave. No problem. It makes sense. It doesn't make sense to have to mail this item, this heavy item, back to China. Other situations is, inspection didn't pick up something, or the product was dinged when the container was loaded, and the corner of this wooden humidor is now, it's blemished. And this person bought this beautiful piano gloss humidor to sit on their office desk, and it looks like the corner is just caved in. It destroys the unit. That's it. It can still humidify cigars, but it's gone. Nobody wants that. and other things that just happen like that, they forgot to put an analog in the face of it, or it got scratched when they were packaging it and they didn't realize it. You can't tell the customer, look, you only need to go buy this paint. Here's a YouTube video on how to apply it. You're not set up to do that. So there's a lot of costs associated. So what I do there, and you can't say, look, you can, but they're probably not going to do it. And that's to say, ship me an extra 20% of full humidors so I can use as replacements. The better play here is to actually negotiate a percentage off your purchase order. And this one, again, I'm surprised that a lot of people don't do it. How I negotiate this with the suppliers is I'll let them know something like, look, this product is, industry standard, has, and just making something up here, has X amount of defects and these amount of problems. And you can find out what sort of problems the product can have by looking at the negative reviews your competitors have. Customers constantly go on there and say, this was great, I got it for a gift, but, and then you include all those buts. And I jump out there with an extremely high number and say, look, you got to knock off 12%. And they scream bloody murder. Obviously, they're not going to do 12%. Our negotiations usually, depending on the product, fall anywhere between 2 and 5%. And 5 is really not the norm. 3 and 4 has been the sweet spot for me. Keep in mind that if you're selling like buttons or, combs, something with no moving parts and that like never breaks or anything, your defect rate is probably negligible. So what you're negotiating needs to keep that in mind. If you never have any defects or returns, and you're asking them for 5%, and they're aware that, look, we never deal with any returns. We never have anything broke. This is very easy. You're not going to get it. But for those of us that are not so fortunate to deal with products like that, that's what you would do. And that covers returns and damaged goods. So you just build that percentage in, that percentage off your purchase order, even if it's 3% of your actual purchase order or remaining balance at the time, because they're not going to go back and refund you money, but future orders would be for the whole order. That really adds up. And keep a log of what types of returns, refunds, and damaged goods you actually deal with your product, because if what you negotiated does not match that and you're still not made whole, I would renegotiate that with that evidence that you saved, whether it's screenshots, buyer-seller message screenshots, return shipping, pictures of the goods sitting there damaged, whatever it may be, and use that to negotiate that rate up in your favor for future orders. All right, number 5, final one, which is, again, there's several other things besides these 5 that can go inside the body or the anatomy of a purchase agreement, but these are the 5 that I feel can be the most impactful for you to start applying now. They're relatively easy and they're also very important. So this 5th one, tie pay to performance. Not many people talk about this, but most factories that I've worked with in China and the US are chronically late. You're usually, especially when you start, also not a high priority for them. So if you're not a high priority, they're like, look, we got I don't know if they think this way, but you have to wonder, like, I got their money. What are they going to do? Just walk away? I'm going to get it out as soon as I can. We'll just say blank happened, or this happened, and we'll just milk it a little more. People do it in every country. This isn't something just isolated to China, but tie pay to performance was my way to work around this. I heard this at a conference a long time ago towards the beginning of starting. I don't remember the person's name. I don't even know if they were the originator of it, but it was genius. And that is, and you guys will love this too, because this will knock another percentage off your actual purchase order. And that is, look, we've agreed earlier on terminology that the days that we're talking about are these types of days, or this calendar day, or this working day. And we've agreed that the product will be ready in 60 of those days. Now, if the product is not finished on that day, you could say that day, or you could say, I like to say 5 days later, like some grace period, right? The goal here is to not like jump out and penalize them constantly and to keep getting these percentages knocked off. The goal is for them just to comply with what you guys agreed on. And these other steps, they're really in place so that, you can be made whole, or you can, make sure that the factory starts treating you as a greater priority. so that they are never penalized. And that's important. You know what I mean? Like if they are late, like say a factory's 10 days late, that has a very real negative dollar impact on your business. So you got to do something about that. So tie pay to performance for me looks like this. I let them know, look, we agreed on the 60-day lead time. If the product's not ready on the 65th day, blank percentage is taken off the remaining balance. And again, I jump out there with like 12%, something insane. And we usually, in this case, fall at like 4 to 6%. Like that's pretty solid. Now, if you couple that, say 4% here and 3% over there, these are some very real protections that are going on. And these are some very real savings that you can negotiate into your relationship with your factory. Having said that, ever since I've implemented this, so let's say a decade, in a decade, I've only had to enforce it once. That means everybody else that was chronically late, everybody I know that was dealing with chronically late factories that incorporated this into their purchase agreement, what happened magically is the factory, once they've agreed to it, they'll abide by it, is they don't want to take a penalty. So they just make sure that your products are not late. Now, let's say that the products finish on day 59. I get the inspection in there, inspection fails, and we do with inspections for 2 weeks. I don't consider that 2 weeks late. That's different. Again, you're trying to make the relationship work, and you're just setting up parameters to make sure it stays like a well-oiled machine, and everybody's whole here. A little side note on tying pay to performance is if you want your products early. Again, you have an inspection in here, so they're not going to rush through everything because they know that they'll have to pay for subsequent inspections to fix it. But if you want to tie pay to performance and get your products early, you can offer an incentive to get them to finish early. Here, obviously, it's my wallet, so I don't start at 12%, but I'll start at 1%. And plenty of factories work on very small margins, so 1% is a really big deal. And I might say, look, if you finish it 7 to 10 days early, that will give you this percent or fraction of a percent in addition to the remaining balance. And that's worked out really good for me. It also really pushes you far up on the priority list with the factory. You have to know your numbers, though, ultimately. I don't want you to jump out there and structure some percentage and your factory's finishing at 30 days early. And you're taking losses, but really know your numbers here in the sense of like what your cash flow position, just everything, anything you're getting charged for floating that money, and see if this turns into a savings for you. All right, guys. So we covered the 5, which was terminology, quality control, inspections, returns, refunds, damaged goods, and tie pay to performance. I talk about these, this anatomy of a purchase agreement, I'd say like every, 7 or 8 months in my meetup group for the last over 3 years. And one thing that everybody has asked me for, and I've always said, no, I don't have one because it's different every time. And that is a template. So a template would be very handy here. And part of my reason for not creating a template is I feel like it's very bare bones, because what you're looking here is just, imagine a Word doc. And you're looking at something like that. So I never had one, and I decided, since I love you guys have been super supportive in, giving me reviews on this podcast, giving me feedback on this podcast to allow me to want to keep going and not just tuck my tail and run. I have created a template. If you want this template for creating a purchase agreement, it is 100% free. And just let's do this. I really want to grow my Instagram and get some more conversation going over there on Instagram. DM me on Instagram and ask me for this. You could mention the episode number, but just say something like, send me the purchase agreement template that you mentioned on the podcast. Just say something like that. Drop me a hello. Let me know what you think about the episode in the DM. It would be very appreciated. You can find me on Instagram at Wizards of Amazon. So if you are interested in that template, you can get it there. There's 2 important notes I want to bring up regarding this purchase agreement structure that a lot of people trip up on when they implement it, and I'll wrap up after that. One of them is no legal docs. Well, what I mean by that is don't go all like legal on the factory. It's insane. Is there an opportunity here to bring in a lawyer and get this structured legally? Of course. So to all my amazing friends like Jeff Schick, CJ Rosenbaum, I don't disagree with you that there is a time and a place for that. But for the average seller just starting, and myself from experience, I didn't incorporate a lawyer for these things. What I have found is when I tried to get all when I think of a lawyer, I think of like Johnny Cochran. So I'm like, I don't get all Johnny Cochran with him. And every time I do get Johnny Cochran with him in the beginning, it just devolved into like this disaster. I didn't get any of the agreements I wanted in place. Nobody likes to feel like they're being legaled up on. Nobody likes to read a document that makes them think I need to lawyer up. So you don't want to present them with this big legal document with like sign here on this date. I solemnly swear. It's not needed. Remember, at the end of all this, we don't have true legal protections in this. What does help, though, is if you have these purchase agreements and it's got the company chop on it at the end, because you do want them, once you agree on the purchase agreement, to hit it with their company a chop that they do agree, that stamp. But at the end of the day, if you took this the distance in Chinese court and it was something that was created in the United States and agreed upon, I don't know how far you would get in the courts. Fortunately, these agreements have allowed me to never have to go there. And the very few instances that I've had to enforce it, I've only had to enforce type pay to performance once, but I've had to, enforce penalties that I've built into the quality control phase, or I've had to enforce, you need to send me more than what you sent me on returns, refunds, and damaged goods. I've had to enforce, you need to pay for 6 subsequent inspections. Like whenever I've had to do that, having the agreement in place with the company chop on it was more than enough. There was no need to get there. Were they unhappy that they had to pay? Yes, but you never needed to get there. So presenting this in a way that makes someone feel like they need to legal up or lawyer up defeats the purpose. Plain English here, simple words works great. You're looking for an agreement and an opportunity to build your relationship, not seed it with landmines. If that makes sense, it's the best way I can say it. So you want to build the relationship. You're trying to structure this so both of you can grow and have long-lasting cooperation or long-term cooperation, and not seed it with landmines. That's a good example. I don't know where I got that from, but it's perfect. The final one is don't spring all at once. Think about this, guys. There's a time and a place to bring some or all of this up. Let's say you're already established and working with the factory. So you're at a stage where you could start implementing all of these. If you start bombarding them with all of it, or send them a doc and say, I'm requesting all our terminology be this, or quality control, send it to me. Refunds, you must start paying this percentage, and all this stuff, their negotiation now is going to factor in all of that. If they're even willing to cave immediately and just comply. So likewise, if you're in the sample part and you haven't really negotiated pricing, if you let them know all of this stuff that's coming, then the pricing negotiation they give you is going to be skewed to factor that in. So it's going to be higher than what it needed to be. So get your negotiation with price out of the way, get it to the point where you're ready to go. Even send an inspection team in at your own dime for like a factory audit, if you will. And then so that they're accustomed to like, this is something you're going to do. This is what it looks like. And then start bringing these things up one at a time. And I bring it up in a plain email. I bring it up just in a communication, in a queue in a communication on WeChat. I can't speak today. I just bring it in there and we have a conversation. And once we've had this debate back and forth, I might bring up the next point and then the next point. And they never know that there's an additional point that's coming. And then once all of that's done, or all the important things or things that I feel like I can deal with at this time are done, then I let them know a recap in just regular communication, just WeChat or email. And this is what we've agreed to. And they're like, yeah. And then I was like, oh, check your email. I put something together. That's where I've had the greatest success in implementing something like this. You don't want to send it, all to them at once. It's overwhelming. It's confusing. Some factories, they've built their businesses almost exclusively for Amazon sellers. So they've almost been trained to what to expect and not to expect. Remember, there used to be a day when all samples from factories in China were free. And it was a beautiful thing until courses started coming out on how to start a 7-figure business on free samples from China, and they needed to change. So, build the relationship. I hope these 5 pieces of the purchase agreement anatomy really help you in your business. Let me know. DM me on Instagram, or you can jump over in the Wizards of Amazon Facebook group or our Telegram chat. Jump in there and let me know what kind of impact this had on your business, and let me know like what stages you're in communication with this. It's had a huge impact on my business, and I truly hope it has in yours. You're going to be listening to this after the fourth quarter has passed. But I truly, here I am in early December. I truly wish you an amazing close to your fourth quarter. And thank you so much for listening to this episode and being a supporter. If you haven't left a review, I would truly appreciate it. You really rock. I'm out. Liked what you heard and want to stay connected? Join our Facebook group or find me anywhere on social media at Wizards of Amazon, or text the word Amazon to 69922.